I went back home because I forgot my blood pressure medication, but when I opened the door, I heard voices in the living room. I froze when I recognized the voice of my daughter-in-law, Melissa, talking on the phone with someone. "Yes, Mom, we have almost everything ready. The old lady is going to have to hand over the house. She has no other choice," she said as she paced back and forth. My heart raced as she continued. "Michael and David are already on board. I told them it was only fair, that after all these years of us looking after her, we deserve for her to give us the house so our whole family can live comfortably. My sons were demanding that I hand over my house to my daughter-in-law's entire family, but I had other plans." I hid behind the door, feeling my hands tremble with indignation. Melissa kept talking. "Dad can bring the uncles too, the house is big enough. And if Helen doesn't want to, well, she can go to a nursing home or something." She served her purpose. Every word was like a dagger straight to my heart. This woman, whom I had welcomed into my home like a daughter, whom I had cared for when she was sick, whom I had helped financially in her difficult times, was now planning to take away the only thing I had left. The house I built with my own hands, working double shifts at the textile mill for 30 years. I felt a mixture of pain and rage I had never experienced before. How was it possible that my own sons agreed with such a plan? Michael, my firstborn, whom I raised with so much love after his father abandoned us when he was just 5 years old. David, my baby, who was always the most affectionate and protective of me. Did they really believe I deserved to be thrown out like an old piece of furniture? Melissa hung up the phone and went out into the backyard. I took the opportunity to slip inside, pretend I had just arrived, and grab my medication. When she came back, she found me in the kitchen making coffee. "Oh, Helen, I didn't hear you come in," she said with that fake smile I now recognized perfectly. "I came back for my pills. I forgot them this morning," I replied, trying to stay calm. But inside, my mind was racing, trying to process what I had just discovered. For the next few minutes, as we shared a coffee, I watched Melissa's every move with new eyes. The way she looked at the house, as if it were already hers. How she talked about improvements that could be made, about making better use of the space. It all made sense now. The increasingly frequent visits, the questions about my documents, the subtle suggestions about modernizing things on the property. I had been so naive, so trusting. "You know what, Helen? Michael and I were thinking it would be good for us to talk about the future," Melissa began in a syrupy tone. "You're 67 years old now, and maintaining this big house must be exhausting. Maybe it's time to think about something more practical." There it was, the beginning of her plan. But I was no longer the same naive woman from 5 minutes ago. "Practical?" I asked, feigning curiosity. "Yes, well, we could help you more if we lived here. And that way you wouldn't have to worry about the expenses, the upkeep, all those difficult things." The hypocrisy was sickening. This same woman who barely contributed $50 a month for expenses when she lived here during the first years of her marriage was now concerned about my well-being. The same one who never lifted a finger to help with cleaning or cooking, who always had excuses not to accompany me to the doctor or the grocery store. Now, it turned out she wanted to take care of me by living in my house with her entire family. "That's very thoughtful of you, Melissa," I replied, keeping my composure. "But you know I like my independence. This house has been my sanctuary for so many years." She insisted. "But think about it carefully, Helen. We could take care of everything. You would just have to enjoy your grandchildren and rest." Grandchildren I barely saw because they always had excuses not to visit. Grandchildren Melissa used as bargaining chips whenever she needed something from me. I said a cordial goodbye and went back to my work, but my mind wouldn't stop spinning. All afternoon, while I reviewed invoices and served customers at my small alterations shop, I couldn't concentrate. Melissa's words echoed in my head. "The old lady is going to have to hand over the house." As if it were an obligation, as if I owed them something, as if all these years of sacrifice, of hard work, of building a legacy with my own 2 hands, meant nothing. That night, alone in my house, I walked through each room, remembering the moments lived within those walls. The living room where we celebrated Michael's first birthday, the kitchen where I taught my sons how to bake cookies, the backyard where I planted the roses I loved so much. Every corner held a story. Every space held memories of a lifetime of work and dedication. And now they wanted to snatch it all away, as if I had no right to enjoy the fruits of my labor. The next day I woke up with a strange sense of calm. It was as if I had slept soundly for the first time in months, despite everything I had discovered. As I prepared my morning coffee, I reflected on how I had gotten here, to this life that had cost me so much to build. I remembered my beginnings, when Michael was just 5 years old and David was a baby in my arms. Their father had left us without warning, leaving me alone with 2 small children and not a penny to my name. In those days, I worked at the textile mill from 6 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon, and at night I did sewing jobs at home to earn a few extra dollars. My hands were always busy, always creating, always fighting to provide for my family. On weekends, I sold homemade pies at the local farmers market, waking up at 4 in the morning to prepare the dough and fillings. Every dollar I earned was sacred. Every cent had a purpose. Food, clothes for the children, medicine when they got sick. I vividly remember the day I decided to buy this plot of land. Michael was 12 and David was 10. We had been living in a small rented apartment where the 3 of us shared a single room. The boys slept in a bed and I slept on a mattress on the floor. I dreamed of giving them something better, a place of our own where they could run, play, and grow without the limitations of a small space. I had saved for 7 years, putting every coin in a cookie tin I hid under my bed. The land cost $8,000, a fortune for me at the time. But the seller, an elderly gentleman named Mr. Abernathy, took pity on my situation. He allowed me to pay it off in installments over 2 years, with the condition that if I missed a single payment, I would lose everything I had invested. I signed without hesitation, knowing it was my only chance to build something lasting for my sons. During those 2 years, I worked like never before. I took extra shifts at the factory, accepted every sewing job that came my way, and sold every last pie on the weekends. Building the house was a slow process, but it was filled with hope. I hired a contractor for the foundation and the main walls, but I did everything else myself with the help of some supportive neighbors. I learned how to install plumbing by watching videos at the public library, painted every wall with my own hands, and installed every tile in the bathroom, working late into the night. Michael and David helped me after school, carrying bricks, mixing cement, and clearing debris. It was our family project, our shared dream. I remember the excitement on their faces the day we finally moved in. Michael ran through the entire house, shouting with joy, choosing which room would be his. David couldn't believe we would have our own yard, where we could plant whatever we wanted. That first night in our new house, the 3 of us stayed up late, lying on the living room floor, because we didn't have any furniture yet, but we were immensely happy. It was our house, built with love, sacrifice, and a tremendous amount of work. The following years were ones of stability and growth. My alterations business began to thrive. The boys studied at a good school, and we had a quiet, prosperous routine. Michael excelled in math and dreamed of being an engineer, while David showed a talent for art and talked about studying graphic design. I supported them in everything, paying for tutors when they needed them, buying materials for their school projects, and making sure they never lacked anything for their education. When Michael turned 18, I gave him $1,000 for his high school graduation. It was money I had saved penny by penny over 2 years, keeping it a secret for that special occasion. He cried when I gave it to him, telling me I was the best mother in the world. I did the same for David 2 years later. I always tried to be fair to both of them, to give them the same opportunities, the same love, the same dedication. Michael met Melissa when he was in college. At first, she seemed like a sweet, polite girl with good manners. She came from a family of modest means, just like us, and that made me feel like she would understand our values and the effort behind everything we had. When he asked for my blessing to marry her, I cried with emotion. My eldest son was marrying a good woman, or so I thought at the time. The wedding was held in our home, in the garden I had worked so hard to create and maintain. The first years of their marriage were harmonious. Melissa and Michael lived with me for 2 years while he finished college and got a stable job. I never charged them rent. I only asked them to contribute $50 a month for food and utilities. Melissa occasionally helped with the cleaning and cooking, though she always seemed to do it reluctantly. But I chalked her attitude up to youth and the natural adjustment of living with a mother-in-law. When they finally moved into their own apartment, I felt a mix of pride and nostalgia. My son had managed to become independent, start his own family, build his future. It was exactly what I had dreamed for him when I was working those long shifts at the factory. David continued to live with me for a few more years, until he also found a job and moved out on his own. For the first time in decades, I was alone in the house, but I didn't feel lonely. I felt fulfilled, satisfied to have completed my mission as a mother. The years of solitude were actually years of personal rediscovery. I could dedicate more time to my business, expand my clientele, and save more money. I renovated parts of the house, replaced old furniture with more comfortable pieces, and planted new flowers in the garden. It was my golden age, the reward after decades of sacrifice. My sons came to visit me regularly. Melissa seemed to have developed a genuine affection for me, and the grandchildren filled the house with laughter on weekends. But now, remembering all those moments as I drank my coffee, I realized the signs had been there for a long time. The increasingly frequent questions about my savings, the suggestion to modernize the house, the comments about how big it was for one person. Melissa had been planting the seeds of her plan for years, so subtly that I hadn't even noticed what was happening. The reality hit me like a punch to the gut. They had been waiting patiently for me to get old enough to be considered vulnerable. They had calculated the perfect moment to execute their plan, when they thought I would be too weak or confused to resist. But they were completely mistaken. At 67 years old, my mind was clearer than ever, and my determination was ironclad. 3 days after overhearing Melissa's phone conversation, I decided I needed more information before making any decisions. I couldn't act based on just one call, no matter how revealing it had been. That morning, while I was watering the plants in the garden, I saw Michael's car pull up. It was strange because he usually called before visiting, but this time he arrived unannounced, accompanied by David. My 2 sons, together. Something that didn't happen often, unless it was a special occasion. I greeted them as naturally as always, offering them coffee and asking about their families. But there was something different about their behavior. Michael seemed nervous, avoiding eye contact, while David was unusually serious. After a few minutes of small talk, Michael cleared his throat and said, "Mom, we need to talk to you about something important." My heart sped up, but I kept my composure. "Of course, boys. Tell me whatever you need to," I replied, pouring coffee into the mugs they themselves had given me years ago. David was the first to speak. "Mom, we've been thinking a lot about your situation here in the house." The word situation struck me as odd, as if living in my own home was a problem that needed solving. "Michael and I think it's time for you to consider, well, to think about more comfortable alternatives for yourself." There it was, beginning exactly as Melissa had planned. My own sons, the children I raised with so much love and sacrifice, were now suggesting I abandon my home. Michael took over. "Look, Mom, it's not that we want to get rid of you or anything. It's just that this house is very big, very expensive for one person to maintain. The utility bills, the repairs, the yard work. It's all a lot for someone your age." 67 years old didn't seem that old to me, especially since I felt strong and capable of taking care of my property. But apparently, to them, I was already a decrepit old woman unable to manage her own affairs. "Besides," David continued, "we thought you might be more comfortable in a smaller place, easier to clean and maintain. There are even some very nice retirement communities, with activities, companionship, and 24-hour medical care. Retirement communities. Nursing homes. Exactly what Melissa had mentioned on the phone. The coincidence was too obvious to be a coincidence. I feigned consideration as I internally processed the magnitude of their betrayal. "What you're saying is interesting," I replied slowly. "But I don't understand why you think I need to change my lifestyle. I feel great here. This house has been my whole life." Michael shifted uncomfortably in his seat before continuing. "It's just that, Mom, we have our needs too. Mikey is getting bigger, he needs more space. And Melissa's family." There it was, the truth starting to come out. "Melissa's family?" I asked, feigning confusion. "Yes," Michael went on. "Her parents are having financial difficulties, and her brothers also need a place to live temporarily. We thought that if you moved to somewhere smaller, we could use this house to help the family. It would be like a work of charity. A work of charity. My house, built with the sweat of my brow, the sacrifice of decades, was now being presented as an opportunity to perform charity for my daughter-in-law's family, David added. And don't think we're going to abandon you, Mom. We'd check on you, visit you constantly. We could even help you financially with the expenses of your new place. The irony was cruel. They were offering me financial help to pay for a nursing home while they took possession of a house worth over $200,000 on the current market. A house whose value had increased considerably since I built it, thanks to all the improvements and constant maintenance I had given it. I understand your concern for me, I said, maintaining a calm tone, but I need time to think about it. It's a very important decision. Changing your whole life isn't something you do overnight. Michael seemed relieved that I hadn't rejected the idea outright. Of course, Mom, take all the time you need. But think about it carefully. It would be the best for everyone. The best for everyone. Except for me, obviously. After they left, I sat in my living room replaying the conversation. Every word had been carefully calculated. Every argument designed to make me feel like a burden, like someone who needed to be rescued from her own life. But I knew the truth. This had nothing to do with my well-being or comfort. It was pure greed, pure ambition to take what didn't belong to them. That afternoon, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I called my friend Evelyn, the only person I could completely trust. Evelyn and I had worked together at the textile mill for over 20 years, and she had witnessed my entire struggle to build this life. If anyone could understand the gravity of the situation, it was her. Evelyn, I need to see you urgently, I told her over the phone. Something is happening with my sons and I need an outside opinion. We met that same afternoon at the little coffee shop where we used to meet from time to time. Evelyn arrived in her characteristic olive green dress and that warm smile that always calmed me down. I told her everything. Melissa's phone call, my son's visit, the hints about moving me to a retirement home. Evelyn listened in silence, but I saw her expression harden with every detail I recounted. Helen, she said finally, this is exactly what happened to my neighbors 2 years ago. The children convinced them to sell their house to help them with finances, promising they would all live together in a new house. In the end, the old couple ended up in a cheap nursing home while the kids enjoyed the money from the sale. Her story sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't the first time something like this had happened, and it probably wouldn't be the last. But Evelyn, I said, they're my sons. I raised them, educated them, sacrificed everything for them. How could they do this to me? She took my hands firmly. Helen, a mother's love doesn't always guarantee a child's love. Sometimes people change, they get influenced, they become greedy, and that daughter-in-law of yours. From the first day you introduced her to me, I didn't like something about her. She had that calculating look, as if she was sizing up everything you owned. Evelyn was right. I remembered perfectly the day I introduced her to Melissa. My friend had been polite, but reserved, and later commented that the girl seemed too interested in the details of my house and business. At the time, I thought Evelyn was being judgmental, but now I realized her instincts had been spot on from the beginning. What do you advise me to do? I asked, feeling more vulnerable than I had in years. First, Evelyn replied with determination, you need to protect your assets. Go to the bank, talk to a lawyer, make sure no one can do anything with your property without your consent. Second, don't give them the slightest hint that you know what they're planning. Let them think you're considering their proposal while you prepare your own strategy. I returned home that night with a mix of sadness and determination. The sadness of realizing that my own sons had betrayed me, but the determination not to let them get away with it. I had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, and built too much to just give up now. If they thought that being an older woman made me easy to manipulate, they were about to find out just how wrong they were. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed up late, walking through the house and replaying every conversation I'd had with Michael and David in recent months. Now, with this new perspective, everything began to make a sinister kind of sense. The seemingly innocent questions about my legal documents, the suggestion to update my will, the comments about how expensive it must be to maintain such a large house. It had all been part of a carefully orchestrated plan. I vividly remembered a conversation I had with Michael about 3 months ago. He had come to visit on a Sunday afternoon while we were having coffee in the garden. He asked me, "Mom, do you have all your papers in order? Your house deed, your will, those important things." At the time, it seemed like a logical question from a responsible son concerned about his mother's well-being. "Yes, son. Everything is in the safe deposit box at the bank," I had replied without suspicion. "And do you have copies here at home?" he had insisted. "Just some basic copies in my filing cabinet," I answered, even feeling proud of his apparent maturity and responsibility. Now I realized that conversation hadn't been casual. Michael was assessing how easy it would be to access my documents, how vulnerable my legal situation was. He had probably gone back with that information to Melissa, who would have designed the next step of their strategy. The thought made my stomach turn. My own son, the boy I had carried in my arms for entire nights when he was sick, was now part of a conspiracy to strip me of everything I had built. I also remembered a strange conversation I had with David a few weeks ago. He had come home with a worried expression and told me, "Mom, I've been thinking about your future. Don't you feel lonely living here? Wouldn't it be better if you were surrounded by people your own age, with activities, with medical care available?" At the time, I thought it was sweet of him to worry about my social well-being. "I don't feel lonely, son," I had replied. "I have my friends, my work, my routine. I like my independence." But he had insisted. "It's just that, Mom, at your age, a lot can happen. An accident, a medical emergency. If you lived in a specialized community, you'd have immediate help." The manipulation had been subtle but constant. My sons had been planting seeds of insecurity and dependence for months, trying to convince me that I needed to be rescued from my own life. And behind it all was Melissa, the mastermind of the operation, the one who had turned my sons into her accomplices. I wondered how long she had been planning this. How long had she been waiting for the perfect moment to execute her plan? I also replayed Melissa's behavior during recent family visits. How she assessed each room with a calculating gaze, as if she were already mentally decorating the spaces for her family. How she made comments about optimizing the use of certain rooms, about modernizing the kitchen or the bathroom. How she always asked about the cost of repairs or improvements I made to the house, as if she were keeping a mental tally of the investment. I especially remembered one occasion, just a month ago, when Melissa brought her mother for a visit. The woman had toured the whole house with an admiration that seemed genuine to me at the time. "What a beautiful house, Helen," she had said. "It must have cost a fortune to build." Proud of my work and sacrifice, I had told her the whole story. How I had saved every penny, how I had worked double shifts for years, how I had built much of it with my own hands. Melissa's mother had listened very attentively, asking specific questions about costs, materials, and improvements made. Now I understood that conversation hadn't been a casual chat between older women. It had been an evaluation, an informal appraisal of my property. Melissa's mother had probably gone home with all the information necessary for her daughter to calculate exactly how much what they were trying to take from me was worth. The family's complicity was obvious. They were all in on the plan. I got out of bed and went to my filing cabinet, where I kept copies of my most important documents. I took out the deed to my house and read it carefully, as if for the first time. There was my name, clearly stated as the sole owner. I also reviewed my will, a simple document I had made years ago, leaving everything equally divided between Michael and David. But that will would only take effect after my death, and I had no intention of dying soon to make things easier for them. The reality of the situation hit me with renewed force. My children didn't just want my house, they wanted to get rid of me so they could enjoy it freely. They didn't want to deal with the inconvenient presence of the original owner. They wanted all the benefits without any of the responsibilities, all the rights without any of the obligations. And the most painful part of all was that they had probably been waiting for years for me to be old enough to be considered incompetent or vulnerable. I sat on my bed and cried for the first time since I had discovered the betrayal. They weren't tears of self-pity, but tears of mourning. I was crying for the death of the image I had of my children, the loss of the family I thought I had, the end of the dreams I had harbored for our future together. I had imagined that in my golden years I would enjoy the company of my children and grandchildren, that they would care for me with the same love I had cared for them. Instead, I discovered they saw me as an obstacle to their ambitions. But after crying, I felt something more powerful, a steely determination I hadn't experienced in years. If they thought I was going to hand them my life on a silver platter, they were completely mistaken. If they thought that being an older woman made me easy to manipulate and deceive, they were in for the surprise of their lives. I had survived poverty, abandonment, years of grueling work, and raising 2 sons alone. I was not going to let them defeat me now, precisely when I should be enjoying the fruits of so much sacrifice. That morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to confront them directly yet. That would be a strategic mistake. Instead, I was going to play their game. I was going to pretend I was seriously considering their proposal while secretly preparing my own counteroffensive. If they wanted to be manipulative, they were about to find out that their mother had learned a few lessons in her 67 years of life. By dawn, I had a basic plan in mind. First, I needed to legally protect my assets to ensure no one could do anything without my explicit consent. Second, I had to investigate more deeply to fully understand the extent of the conspiracy. How many people were involved? How detailed was their plan? Had they already identified the nursing home where they wanted to put me? Third, I needed to document everything I could to have proof of their betrayal. But the most important thing of all was to maintain the facade. I had to continue being the loving and seemingly naive mother they thought I was. I had to make them believe I was falling into their trap, that their arguments were gradually convincing me. Only then could I buy the time I needed to prepare my definitive response. I showered, got dressed, and ate breakfast with a serenity that surprised even me. For the first time in days, I knew exactly what I had to do. The battle had just begun, and although my opponents believed they had all the advantages, they were about to discover they had seriously underestimated their adversary. At 9 o'clock the next morning, I called the bank where I'd had my account for over 20 years. "Good morning. This is Helen Carter. I need an urgent appointment with the manager to review some matters regarding my account and my documents." The receptionist knew me well and scheduled me for that same afternoon. Next, I dialed the number for Mr. Augustine Morales, a lawyer who had been recommended to me years ago when I made my will. "Mr. Morales, this is Helen Carter. I need urgent legal advice on asset protection and property rights." While I waited for my appointments, I decided to do something I hadn't done in a long time: thoroughly review all my financial documents. I pulled out my bank statements, the house deed, property tax receipts, everything that could be relevant. I was pleasantly surprised to find that my financial situation was much better than I had thought. Between my savings, the current value of the house, and my small alterations business, I had a considerable net worth for a woman of my age and humble beginnings. The house, according to the latest insurance appraisal, was worth approximately $250,000. My savings added up to another $80,000, the result of years of constant work and a frugal lifestyle. The business, though small, generated a steady income of around $1,500 a month. It was a solid financial position that would allow me to live comfortably and independently for many years to come. Exactly what Melissa and my sons wanted to take from me. At 2 in the afternoon, I arrived at the bank. The manager, Mr. Octavio Ramirez, greeted me with his usual warmth. "Helen, what can I help you with today?" I explained my situation without going into too many personal details. "Mr. Ramirez, I need to make sure that no one but me can access my accounts or make transactions with my assets. I've heard stories of elderly people being swindled by family members, and I want to protect myself proactively." The manager nodded understandingly. "That's very wise of you to think about this, Helen. Unfortunately, we have seen some unfortunate cases of financial abuse towards seniors. We proceeded to review all my accounts and set up additional security measures. We changed all the passwords. We established that any transaction over $500 would require direct phone confirmation with me, and we added a special note to my file indicating that under no circumstances should information about my accounts be given to third parties, not even family, without my written and in-person authorization. I would also recommend," Mr. Ramirez added, "that you consider creating a very specific power of attorney, only for cases of a real medical emergency, and only with someone you absolutely trust. I made a mental note to discuss this with the lawyer. It was clear I needed legal protection, but I also had to be careful not to create documents that could be used against me later. At 4:30, I arrived at Mr. Augustine Morales' office. His office was small but tidy, filled with law books, and had a serious but welcoming atmosphere. The lawyer was a man in his 50s, gray-haired, with an intelligent and attentive expression. "Mrs. Carter, how can I assist you?" I told him my situation in more detail than I had with the bank manager, explaining the pressure from my sons, the comments about retirement homes, and my suspicions about the family's true intentions. The lawyer listened attentively, taking occasional notes. "Mrs. Carter," he said finally, "what you're describing is unfortunately more common than people think. It's a form of financial abuse towards the elderly, and the law has specific protections for these cases." He explained that I had several legal options available. First, I could establish a trust that would protect me from any attempt at a fraudulent declaration of incompetence. Second, I could legally document any pressure or coercion I was receiving. "But Mr. Morales," I asked, "what if I actually decide to sell my house? Can I do it without them finding out until it's too late for them to interfere?" He smiled slightly. "Of course, Mrs. Carter, you are the sole owner, and you are in full possession of your mental faculties. You can sell your property whenever you want, to whomever you want, and for the price you deem fair. In fact, if I may suggest, we could prepare all the sale documentation confidentially, so that when you decide to proceed, the process will be quick and irreversible." That suggestion greatly intrigued me. How quickly could a sale be done, Mr. Morales? "If we have a pre-identified buyer and all the documentation prepared in advance, we could close the transaction in less than a week," he replied. "We could even use a temporary blind trust, so the sale is processed without your name appearing on public records until the very last moment." The possibilities began to take shape in my mind. I left the lawyer's office with a sense of empowerment I hadn't felt in weeks. I had options, I had resources, I had legal protections. I was not the helpless victim my sons and Melissa believed me to be. But now came the hardest part, the investigation. I needed to fully understand what they were planning, who was involved, and what their timeline was. That evening, as I was having dinner alone in my kitchen, the phone rang. It was Michael. "Mom, how are you? We've been thinking about our conversation the other day. Have you had time to reflect on what we proposed?" His voice sounded forcedly casual, but I could detect the underlying anxiety. "Yes, son, I've been thinking a lot," I replied, maintaining a reflective tone. "It's a huge decision, but I understand your concerns for me. I'm so glad to hear that, Mom," Michael continued, and I could hear the relief in his voice. "How about we visit some retirement communities this weekend, so you can see the options? Melissa has been doing some research, and there are some really beautiful places, with lots of activities for people your age." There it was, confirmation that they had already moved forward with their plans. Melissa had been researching options to get rid of me. "That sounds like a good idea, Michael," I replied, surprising myself at how convincing my performance sounded. "But I don't want it to be a rash decision. If I'm going to make this choice, I want to be completely sure it's the right one. Of course, Mom, we'll take all the time you need. But you'll see, once you get to know the available options, you'll feel much more at ease about the future." After I hung up, I thought about the conversation. Michael had sounded so different. He wasn't the loving son I knew, but someone following a prepared script. The words came out too rehearsed, too calculated. It was obvious he had been practicing what to say, probably under Melissa's tutelage. My heart ached as I realized how much my son had changed, how he had allowed his wife to turn him into an accomplice in this betrayal. The next day, I decided to do something risky, but necessary. I called Melissa directly. "Hi, Melissa, it's me, Helen. Do you have time for coffee this afternoon? I'd like to talk to you about a few things." Melissa seemed surprised, but accepted immediately. "Of course, Helen. Is everything okay?" "Yes. I just need a woman's perspective on a few things," I replied, knowing that would pique her curiosity. We met at the same coffee shop, where I had met with Evelyn. Melissa arrived on time, dressed in an elegant cream-colored suit that probably cost more than I earned in a month. She sat across from me with a smile I now recognized as completely false. "So, Helen, what can I help you with?" "Melissa," I began slowly, "I've been thinking a lot about the conversation I had with Michael and David. About my future, about the house, about everything." I saw her eyes light up with barely contained interest. "It's a very difficult decision for me, but I think you're right. At my age, maintaining that house is too much work." Melissa leaned forward, clearly thrilled by what she was hearing. "I'm so glad you're considering our suggestions, Helen," she responded with poorly disguised enthusiasm. "Michael and I only want what's best for you. And I assure you, if you decide to make this change, we'll be there to support you in every way." "That's very reassuring, Melissa," I continued. "But I have some practical concerns. For example, what would happen to the house? I can't just abandon it." "Oh, don't worry about that," Melissa replied immediately. "Michael and I have talked about it. We would take care of everything. In fact, it would be a relief for us to know the house is being looked after by family, that it's not abandoned or in the hands of strangers." There was the direct admission of her intentions. She hadn't mentioned for a moment the possibility of selling the house to pay for my stay in a retirement community. She simply assumed they would keep it. "That does put my mind at ease," I lied. "But, Melissa, wouldn't it be a huge financial burden for you to maintain 2 properties?" She laughed lightly. "The truth is, we were thinking of moving into your house and selling ours. It's much bigger, it's in a better location, and frankly, we've always liked it more." The brutal honesty of her answer left me momentarily breathless. Melissa's confession left me momentarily speechless, but I managed to maintain my composure. "I understand," I replied slowly. "It makes sense from a practical standpoint." But inside, my mind was racing, processing the sheer audacity of her plan. Not only did they want to keep my house, but they had already planned to sell their own for an additional profit. It was a perfect plan. Get rid of me, take my property, and on top of that, make extra money by selling the house they currently lived in. "Besides," Melissa continued, clearly excited by my apparent receptiveness, "my family could help us with the maintenance costs. My parents are thinking of moving in too, and my brothers could help with the cleaning and the yard." There it was, the final confirmation of what I had heard in her phone conversation. Her entire family was involved in the plan to take over my house. "Your family would move in too?" I asked, feigning innocent curiosity. "Well," Melissa replied, adjusting herself in her chair, "it's a very large house, as you always say. It would make sense to use all the available space, and that way we could split the expenses among more people." The way she talked about my house, as if it were already hers, made my stomach churn. Every word confirmed they had been planning this for a long time. "It seems very considerate of your family to want to help," I commented, maintaining my naive grandmother act. "Yes," Melissa continued, "and Mikey would be thrilled to have more space to play. We could turn your old room into a playroom and David's room into an office for Michael." They had already distributed all the spaces in my house. They had already decided what to do with each room I had built with so much effort. The conversation continued for another half hour, with Melissa revealing more and more details of her plans. She told me about the improvements they wanted to make to the house, how they could modernize the kitchen and bathrooms, about the possibility of building an extension in the backyard to accommodate more family. Every word was like a stab, but I kept nodding and showing interest, mentally storing every detail to use later. "One more thing, Helen," Melissa said at the end of our meeting. "Michael and I have been researching some really beautiful retirement communities. How about we visit a few this weekend, just so you can see the options?" "That sounds perfect," I replied. "The more information I have, the better decision I can make." Melissa said goodbye with a hug that I now found disgusting, but which I received with the same performance as always. That night, I called Evelyn to tell her everything I had discovered. "Helen," she said indignantly, "that woman has no shame. And your sons. I can't believe they're a part of this." "What hurts the most," I confessed, "is realizing how completely Michael has changed. The son I raised would never have done something like this." Evelyn was silent for a moment before replying. "Sometimes the people we love disappoint us in ways we never imagined. But what's important now is that you protect what belongs to you. The next day, I decided to do something that scared me, but was necessary: research the retirement communities Melissa had mentioned. I called 3 of the best-known places in the city and asked about costs, services, and availability. The information I got sent a chill down my spine. The nice places Melissa probably had in mind cost between $3,000 and $5,000 a month. With my current savings, I could afford a decent facility for a maximum of 2 years. After that, I would have to resort to much cheaper, lower-quality places. But the most revealing thing was a conversation I had with the administrator of one of the most expensive communities. "Ma'am," she told me, "many families come here looking for options for their parents or grandparents. Unfortunately, we've noticed that some people bring their elderly relatives here only after having taken their properties. It's a very sad situation, because the senior ends up paying for their own residence with the money from their house sale, while the family keeps the profit." Those words confirmed my worst fears. The plan wasn't just to take my house, but also to make me pay for my own exile with the money from its sale. It was a perfect scheme of financial abuse against the elderly, and my own sons were participating in it. I felt physically sick realizing the depth of their betrayal. That afternoon, I received an unexpected call. It was David. "Mom, how are you feeling? Michael told me you've been seriously considering our proposal about moving to a more comfortable place." His voice sounded strangely nervous, as if he were reading from a script. "Yes, son," I replied. "I've been thinking a lot about what you told me. I think you're right about many things." "I'm so glad to hear that, Mom," David continued. "And I want you to know that Michael and I have been talking about how to help you with the transition. We don't want you to feel abandoned or alone." "You've always been good sons," I lied, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. "But I have a question, David. If I move to a retirement community, what will happen to all my things? I have a whole life accumulated in that house." There was a pause before he answered. "Well, Mom, obviously you'd take your most important things, your keepsakes, your photographs, but a lot of stuff. Well, there isn't that much space in a retirement home. Michael and I could keep some of the furniture, so it stays in the family." There was another piece of the puzzle. They didn't just want my house, they also wanted my belongings, the furniture I had bought with so much effort over the years. "I understand," I replied. "It's very thoughtful of you to want to keep things in the family." "Exactly, Mom. And don't worry about the legal or financial aspects. Michael knows a lawyer who can help us with all the paperwork to transfer the property. It would all be very simple and quick." The mention of a lawyer to transfer the property was the last straw. They had even identified the professional who would help them legally strip me of my assets. After hanging up, I sat in my living room and looked around. Every piece of furniture had a story. Every object represented a sacrifice, a moment of joy, a small victory in my struggle to build a decent life. The sofa where I had comforted my sons when they were sick, the table where we had eaten dinner together for so many years, the curtains I had sewn myself to save money. They wanted to divide it all up as if it were the spoils of war. That night, I made a final decision. I was not going to let them get away with it. The time had come to move from investigation to action. I called Mr. Morales and asked for an urgent appointment for the next day. "Mr. Morales," I said, "I want to proceed with the sale of my house as quickly as possible, and I want it to be a complete surprise to my family." "I understand perfectly, Mrs. Carter," the lawyer replied. "Have you already identified a potential buyer?" "Not yet," I admitted, "but I'd rather sell at a price slightly below market if it guarantees a quick and discreet sale." "Very well," said the lawyer. "I know several investors who buy properties with cash. We could have offers in less than a week." I also called my friend Evelyn. "Evelyn," I said, "I need your help with something very important. I'm going to sell my house without my sons knowing, and I need to find a small place to live afterwards." Evelyn didn't hesitate for a second. "Count on me, Helen. In fact, there's a very nice apartment becoming available in my building. It's perfect for one person, has good lighting, and is in a quiet neighborhood." For the first time in weeks, I went to sleep with a sense of peace. I had a plan, I had allies, and I had the determination needed to execute it. My sons and Melissa thought they had everything under control, that I was a helpless old woman who would fall easily into their trap. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. On Friday morning, Michael called to confirm our plan to visit retirement communities over the weekend. "Perfect, son," I replied with feigned enthusiasm. "I'm very excited to see the options you've found for me." As I spoke with him, I had already scheduled a meeting with an investor for Monday, and Mr. Morales was preparing all the documents for a quick sale. The irony was delicious. While they thought they were convincing me to hand over my life on a silver platter, I was orchestrating my own liberation. The battle was about to reach its climax, and I had the element of surprise on my side. On Saturday morning, Michael arrived promptly at 10 o'clock with Melissa and Mikey to take me to visit the retirement communities. Melissa was wearing a very elegant coral-colored dress and a radiant smile that couldn't hide her excitement for what she believed was the triumph of her plan. "Good morning, Helen." She greeted me with a hug that I found repulsive. "We're so excited to show you the options we've found. You'll see, there are some really beautiful places." Mikey, my 8-year-old grandson, ran to hug me. "Grandma, Dad says you're going to move to a place where there will be lots of grandmas and grandpas for you to play with." My grandson's innocence broke my heart. He had no idea what was really happening, how his parents were conspiring to get rid of me. "Yes, my love," I replied, stroking his hair. "We're just exploring some options." During the drive to the first community, Melissa chattered on about the wonderful activities I would have, the peace of mind of not having to worry about home maintenance, the companionship of people my own age. Every word was carefully chosen to make my exile sound like a blessing. Michael nodded at everything his wife said, like a puppet following her instructions. The first community was indeed beautiful. Well-tended gardens, modern facilities, friendly staff. But when the administrator explained the costs, I almost fainted. The full package, including a private room, 3 daily meals, recreational activities, and basic medical care, costs $4,200 a month, she announced cheerfully. Melissa and Michael exchanged satisfied glances. They had clearly already researched these prices. "It's a bit pricey," I commented, feigning concern. "Oh, don't worry about that, Mom," Michael replied immediately. "We'll help you with the expenses." A lie. I knew perfectly well that with my current savings, I could afford that place for less than 2 years, after which I would have to resort to their cheaper options or depend entirely on state aid. We visited 2 other communities during the day. One was even more expensive, and the third was significantly cheaper, but also much less pleasant. The rooms were small, the staff seemed overwhelmed, and the general atmosphere was depressing. "This last option might be more practical in the long run," Melissa suggested discreetly. There was the truth. They wanted me to choose the cheapest option so my savings would last longer, and they wouldn't have to help me financially. During lunch at a nearby restaurant, Melissa was especially talkative. "So what did you think of the options, Helen? Did any of them catch your eye?" "They all have their pros and cons," I replied diplomatically, "but I need time to process all the information." "Of course," Michael intervened. "But don't forget, the sooner you make a decision, the sooner you can start enjoying your new life." What hurt the most was seeing how Mikey listened to the whole conversation without fully understanding what it meant. At one point, my grandson asked me innocently, "Grandma, are you not going to live in your house anymore?" Before I could answer, Melissa jumped in quickly. "Grandma is going to live in a new place where she'll be more comfortable, honey, and we're going to take care of her house so it doesn't get run down." That afternoon, when we returned to my house, Melissa couldn't resist making a few more comments. As we walked through the garden, she pointed to different areas. "You know, Helen, when we take over the house, we could put a small pool back here. Mikey would love that." The casual way she spoke of taking over my house, as if it were already a done deal, confirmed that I had made the right decision. That night, after they left, I called Mr. Morales. "Mr. Morales, how are the preparations for the sale going?" "Excellent news, Mrs. Carter," he replied. "I have 3 very interesting offers. One is for $240,000 in cash with a closing in 5 business days. It's slightly below market value, but it guarantees a quick and hassle-free transaction." "I accept that offer," I replied without hesitation. "Proceed with all the necessary paperwork." On Sunday morning, as I was having coffee in my garden for what I knew might be one of the last times, I received an unexpected call. It was Melissa's mother. Good morning, Helen. It's Regina, Melissa's mom. How are you? I was very surprised to get her call, as Regina and I had barely spoken directly on the few occasions we had met. I'm fine, Regina. Thank you for asking, I replied, curious about the purpose of her call. Look, Helen, she continued in a confidential tone. Melissa told me about your plans to move into a retirement community. I think that's a very wise decision on your part. The way she said it confirmed that Melissa's entire family was aware of the plan and had probably been discussing among themselves how to divide the benefits. Yes, I replied, keeping up my act. It's a difficult decision, but I think it's for the best. Exactly, Regina continued with poorly disguised enthusiasm. And I wanted to tell you that my family is very grateful for the opportunity to help Michael and Melissa by taking care of the house. Don't you worry. We'll keep it in perfect condition. There was the final confirmation that Melissa's entire family was involved in the plot. That's very reassuring to know, Regina, I lied. A house needs to be lived in and cared for to stay in good shape. Of course, she replied. In fact, we've already been making some plans on how to arrange the rooms to comfortably accommodate the whole family. The audacity was incredible. They were already planning how to carve up my house before I had even made an official decision. On Monday morning, I arrived early at Mr. Morales' office. The sale documents were perfectly prepared, and the buyer, an investor named Octavio Mendoza, had already deposited the money into a trust account. Mrs. Carter, the lawyer explained, once you sign these documents, the sale will be official and irreversible. Are you absolutely sure you want to proceed? Completely sure, I replied, signing each document with determination. Now, Mr. Morales, I need your help finding a small apartment to live in. Something modest but comfortable, preferably near my friend Evelyn's building. I already anticipated that need, the lawyer smiled. I have contacts at several real estate agencies, and there's a one-bedroom apartment available in a very secure building, 10 minutes from where your friend lives. That same afternoon, I went to see the apartment with Evelyn. It was perfect for my needs. A spacious bedroom, an integrated living and dining area, a functional kitchen, and a small balcony overlooking a park. Most importantly, the monthly rent was only $800, completely manageable with my income. I'll take it, I told the manager without hesitation. On Tuesday morning, as I was discreetly packing some of my most valuable belongings, I received a call from Michael. Mom, have you been thinking more about the communities we visited? Melissa and I are anxious to know which one you liked best. Yes, son, I replied. I've been reflecting a lot. I think I'm ready for another conversation about it. Perfect, Michael exclaimed with obvious excitement. How about we come over this afternoon to talk? Melissa has been researching more options and even found a place that offers discounts for paying a year in advance. Of course, they wanted me to pay for everything up front to make sure I couldn't change my mind later. That sounds excellent, I replied. Come around 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We'll have a lot to talk about. After I hung up, I smiled for the first time in weeks. Indeed, we would have a lot to talk about. But the conversation was not going to go the way they expected. That afternoon, I prepared coffee and some cookies, just as I always did when my sons came to visit. But this time was different. This was the last time I would act like the naive, manipulable mother they thought I was. In a few hours, they would find out they had seriously underestimated their opponent. At 5 o'clock sharp, Michael and Melissa arrived with a punctuality that betrayed their anxiety. Melissa carried a folder full of brochures and documents, clearly prepared to close the final deal. Michael seemed nervous but determined, like someone about to complete an important mission. I greeted them with my usual smile, offering them coffee and cookies as I had for years. Mom, Michael began after the customary greetings. Melissa and I have been working on finding the best option for you. We want to make sure you make the right decision. Melissa opened her folder with precise movements, like an experienced salesperson. Helen, after a lot of research, we believe we found the perfect community for you. It's called Serenity Meadows, and it offers exactly what you need. Melissa spread a colorful brochure on the table. The residence did look pleasant, with manicured gardens and modern facilities. The best part, she continued enthusiastically, is that they offer a significant discount if you pay for a full year up front. Instead of $4,000 a month, It would only be $3,500, a savings of $6,000 a year. Michael added, "And Mom, we could help you with the down payment. It would be like an investment in your future, in your comfort and peace of mind." The hypocrisy was nauseating. They wanted me to spend my savings on my own exile, while they took possession of a property worth $250,000. "That's very generous of you," I replied, maintaining my act. "But I have some practical questions. If I decide to move to Serenity Meadows, what exactly would happen with my house?" Melissa and Michael exchanged a quick glance before she answered. "Well, Helen, as we discussed, Michael and I would take care of maintaining it. It would be a relief for you not to have to worry about those responsibilities." "I understand," I continued. "But maintenance means costs. Utilities, taxes, repairs. How do you plan to cover those expenses?" Michael cleared his throat nervously. "Well, Mom, we thought the most practical way would be to temporarily transfer the property into our name. That way, we could handle all the legal and financial aspects without complicating things for you with paperwork." There it was. The word transfer had finally left their lips. Not look after or maintain, but transfer. They wanted me to legally hand over my property under the pretext of administrative simplicity. "Temporarily transfer?" I asked, feigning confusion. "What does that mean, exactly?" Melissa leaned forward with her most convincing smile. "It means you would still be the real owner, but legally, the property would be in our name to make it easier to manage expenses and maintenance. It would just be a matter of practical convenience, lie after lie. Once I transferred the property, there would be no going back. I would be left without a house and without assets, completely dependent on their generosity." Michael added, "And Mom, the lawyer we know can handle all the paperwork very simply. We could even do it tomorrow, if you want to get everything sorted out quickly." The urgency was obvious. They wanted to close the deal before I had time to reflect or consult with anyone else. "It's very efficient of you to have everything so well planned," I commented. "But I have one more question. What would happen if, at some point, I wanted to come back to my house? If life in the retirement community didn't turn out as I expected?" Melissa and Michael were momentarily speechless. They clearly hadn't prepared an answer for that possibility. "Well," Michael finally stammered, "that situation would be complicated. We'd have to evaluate it when the time comes." "Complicated?" I asked, pushing further. "Why would it be complicated if it would still be my house?" Melissa interjected quickly. "What Michael means is that once you're settled in at Serenity Meadows, you'll probably realize it's much better than living alone in such a big house." At that moment, the phone rang. It was a call I had been waiting for. "Excuse me for a moment," I said, getting up to answer. It was Mr. Morales. "Mrs. Carter," he said in a clear, audible voice. "I'm calling to confirm that the sale of your property was successfully completed this morning. The money has been deposited into your bank account, and the keys are to be handed over to the new owner tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning." I returned to the living room where Michael and Melissa were waiting with obvious curiosity. "Everything okay, Mom?" Michael asked. "Yes," I replied calmly. "Everything is perfectly fine. In fact, better than it's been in a long time." I sat down across from them and looked them directly in the eye. "I have something very important to tell you." "Michael, Melissa," I began in a firm voice. "I've made a decision about my future, but it's not the one you're expecting." I saw their expressions begin to shift from expectation to confusion. "I am, in fact, moving out of this house. But not to a retirement home." Melissa leaned forward, clearly worried about where the conversation was heading. "I've sold the house," I announced directly. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael and Melissa stared at me as if I had spoken in a foreign language. "What did you say, Mom?" Michael asked in a weak voice. "I said I sold the house. The transaction was completed this morning. I'm handing over the keys to the new owner tomorrow." Melissa was the first to react, jumping from her seat. "You can't have done that. We had an agreement." "What agreement?" I asked coldly. "I never signed any agreement with you. I never promised to give you my house." Michael looked like he was in shock, staring at me as if he didn't recognize me. "But Mom, we were going to take care of the house. We were going to help you." "Help me?" I stood up as well, feeling the rage that had been building for weeks finally surface. You call conspiring to take my house from me helping? You call planning to put me in a nursing home while you take over my assets helping? Melissa turned visibly pale. She realized I knew much more than they thought. Helen, you don't understand, Melissa began, but I cut her off. I understand perfectly. I heard your phone conversation 2 weeks ago, Melissa. The one where you told your mother that the old lady is going to have to hand over the house, where you plan to bring your entire family to live here, where you talked about sending me to a nursing home if I didn't cooperate. Michael looked at me in horror. Mom, that can't be true. It can't be true, Michael. Are you also going to deny it when I tell you your wife had already planned to turn your old room into a playroom and David's into an office? Are you going to tell me you didn't know they had calculated the value of my house down to the last cent? Melissa tried to regain control of the situation. Helen, even if I did say those things, it was just out of frustration. Our intentions were always to help you. Enough with the lies, I shouted, surprising myself with the force in my voice. Your intentions were to rob me, to turn my own sons into accomplices to your greed. Michael finally found his voice. But Mom, where are you going to live? What are you going to do without the house? His concern seemed genuine for the first time in months, but it was too little, too late. I'm going to live in a beautiful apartment I rented with the money from the sale of my house. I'm going to enjoy my money, the fruit of my labor and my sacrifice. And I'm going to live in peace, without ungrateful children conspiring against me. Melissa stormed towards the door, clearly furious. This isn't over. You can't make such important decisions without consulting the family. I laughed bitterly. Family? You talk to me about family after planning to get rid of me like I was trash? Real family doesn't conspire, doesn't lie, doesn't betray. Jorge was still sitting, his head in his hands. Mom, I didn't know that you knew. What you didn't know, Michael, is that your mother is not the helpless old woman you thought she was. What you didn't know is that raising 2 sons alone, building a house with my own hands, and surviving for 67 years taught me to be stronger than you could ever imagine. The confrontation continued for several more minutes, with Melissa screaming accusations and Michael sinking deeper into his chair. Finally, when they realized there was nothing more to discuss, they headed for the door. Melissa stopped at the threshold and shot me a venomous look. You're going to regret this, Helen. Without us, you'll end up alone and abandoned. I was already alone, I replied calmly, but at least now it's by my own choice. Michael approached me one last time. Mom, I know things got out of control, but you're still my mother, if you need anything. Michael, I interrupted him gently but firmly. You are my son, and you always will be. But respect is earned, not inherited. When you decide to be the man I raised and not your wife's puppet, you'll know where to find me. He nodded, his eyes filled with tears, and followed Melissa to the car. I watched them drive away from my window, feeling a strange mix of sadness and liberation. It was painful to see my son leave, but for the first time in months, I felt completely in control of my own life. That night, I packed my most precious belongings, family photographs from better times, some books I had read over and over, the sewing machine that had been with me for decades, and the jewelry I had inherited from my mother. The next day, I handed the keys of my house to Mr. Octavio Mendoza, the new owner. He was an older man, a widower like me, who planned to turn the house into a home for his grandchildren when they came to visit. I was glad to know the house would continue to be a family home, not the headquarters of a scam. Mrs. Carter, he said as he took the keys, I can see the love with which you cared for this house. I promise to maintain it with the same affection. Evelyn arrived with a borrowed truck to help me with the move. How are you feeling? She asked as we loaded the last boxes. Free, I replied without hesitation. For the first time in months, completely free. The apartment I had rented turned out to be even better than I expected. It had a beautiful view of the park, lots of natural light, and a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. The first few weeks in my new home were a time of adjustment and rediscovery. Without the burden of maintaining a large house, I had more time to dedicate to my alterations business. My regular customers had no problem following me to my new location, and soon I even gained new clients from the neighborhood. My financial situation was excellent. With the $240,000 from the house sale conservatively invested, it generated additional income that perfectly supplemented the profits from my business. A month after the move, I received an unexpected call. It was David. "Mom," his voice sounded nervous and regretful. "Can we talk? I need to apologize to you for everything that happened." I agreed to meet him at the coffee shop where I used to meet with Evelyn. He arrived on time, but looked haggard and worried. "Mom," he began before I could say anything, "Michael told me everything that happened. I didn't know Melissa had been planning that for so long." "You didn't know, David?" I asked skeptically. "You didn't know when you were suggesting I move to a retirement community? You didn't know when you were asking about my legal documents?" He looked down, clearly ashamed. "I thought it was really for your own good. Melissa convinced us you were getting too old to live alone, that you needed special care. And it never occurred to you to ask me directly what I wanted," I replied. David sighed deeply. "You're right, Mom. I was a coward. I let Melissa manipulate Michael and me. But I want you to know that since I found out the truth, I've been thinking a lot about the kind of son I've been." His words sounded sincere, but the wound was too deep to be healed with a single conversation. "I appreciate your honesty, David," I told him, "but actions have consequences. You can't conspire against your mother and then expect everything to go back to normal with an apology." "I understand," he replied, "and I don't expect your immediate forgiveness. I just want you to know that I've realized my mistakes and I'm working to be a better person." I asked him about Michael and Melissa. "Michael is devastated," he told me. He realized that Melissa manipulated him for years, not just with the house, but in many other things. They're having serious marital problems. I felt a mix of satisfaction and sadness hearing this. Satisfaction because the truth had finally come out. Sadness because it meant my family was falling apart. "And Melissa's family?" I asked. "Oh," David replied with a bitter smile. "It turns out that when they found out there was no house to inherit, their enthusiasm for helping with the upkeep magically disappeared. Now Michael and Melissa have to manage on their own with their current apartment, which suddenly seems very small and uncomfortable to them." The irony was not lost on me. The same people who had been planning to invade my house now didn't even want to help with real problems. 3 months after my move, I established a routine that filled me with satisfaction. In the mornings, I worked on my business. In the afternoons, I read in the nearby park or visited Evelyn. And in the evenings, I enjoyed the tranquility of my apartment. I had joined a book club at the local library where I met several women my age with similar stories of overcoming adversity and finding independence. One afternoon, while walking through the park, I ran into Mikey, my grandson. He was with a babysitter, evidently because Michael and Melissa were having trouble coordinating their schedules now that they didn't have the option of leaving the boy with me as they had planned. "Grandma," he shouted, running towards me. I hugged him with all the love I had always felt for him, reminding myself that his parents' mistakes were not his fault. "Why don't you live in your big house anymore, Grandma?" he asked with the innocent curiosity of children. "Because I decided it was time for new adventures," I replied. "Do you like your new house?" "I love it," I told him honestly. "It's perfect for me." The babysitter recognized me and greeted me cordially. "The boy asks about you often," she commented in a low voice. "His parents have been very busy lately." That night, I reflected on the conversation with my grandson. I realized that although I had lost the close relationship with my sons, perhaps in the future I could maintain some kind of bond with Mikey. Children deserve to know their grandparents, and he was not to blame for his parents' decisions. I decided that, in time, I would find a way to maintain that connection without compromising my own peace and dignity. 6 months after selling my house, I received one last call from Michael. His voice sounded different, more mature, more reflective. "Mom," he said, "I know I have no right to ask you for anything after everything that happened, but I need you to know something. Melissa and I are getting a divorce." The news didn't surprise me, but I asked him how he felt about it. Relieved, he admitted. I realized that for years I had been living the life she wanted, not mine. Losing you was the too high price I had to pay to realize that. "Michael," I said softly. I hope you've learned something from all this. I learned that respect and love can't be faked, he replied, and that a mother like you deserves sons who honor her, not betray her. His words moved me, but I also remained cautious. Deep wounds need time to heal completely. Now, sitting on my small balcony with a cup of coffee, looking at the park where children play and elderly couples walk hand in hand, I can honestly say that I am at peace. I lost a house, but I gained my dignity. I lost the illusion of a perfect family, but I kept my self-respect. At 68 years old, I discovered that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to say no, to choose the life you truly want to live. My business is thriving, my savings are growing, my friendships are strengthening. David visits me occasionally, trying to rebuild our relationship step by step. Michael is working on himself, and maybe someday we can have a real conversation about what it means to be a family. Melissa disappeared from our lives, probably looking for another vulnerable family to manipulate. Today I am alone, but for the first time in years, I am at peace. And that peace is worth more than any house, more than any inheritance, more than any relationship built on lies and manipulation. Because I learned that being alone by choice is infinitely better than being accompanied by obligation or fear. The story has ended, but my life is just beginning a new chapter. A chapter where I decide, where I choose, where I live on my own terms. And that, at the end of the day, is the only thing that really matters.